Super. So welcome, Jenny.
Oh,
Lovely to have you here. So, professionally speaking, Jenny, so do you want to tell us a little bit about your professional background, about, that you think that the guys here might want to know about? Before I just do that, I'm just going to let you all know that I am going to be sharing some links as we're going through in the chat box as well. So keep an eye on that as we're going through. So over to you, Jenny. Welcome.
great. Thanks, Chloe. It's a pleasure. And thank you for giving up your time this morning, everyone. And well, yeah, just this morning to come and join the workshop. So I've been in practice as a hypno-psychotherapist 25 years. I'd call myself integrative or transpersonal, which is I suppose it's been an evolution. I was certainly trained integratively, but as the years have gone by, I've kind of evolved that into a transpersonal perspective. And, if you're not familiar or it's an unusual word, all it really means is working at real relational depth. So it's looking at the heart and soul of people that are looking for healing of some sort or another. So it's really going beyond the techniquing, it's going beyond what we would consider a healing modality, and it's actually relating at deep depth. So I've been in practice 25 years. I've been through many of my own personal awakenings over that time and before. So it's been an ongoing journey for me. And for me, as many of you probably realize yourselves, if I'm not journeying, I'm not fresh. If I'm not working on my stuff, I'm not fresh for my clients. So my imperative is to keep working on me. That doesn't mean, oh, it's hard work. I'm always working on me. It just means that, I can capture what's going on, um, and give it some kindness and some attention. And one of my, I call it a magic power, but one of my magic powers is that I've actually practiced Buddhism for 43 years now. So I met it when I was 19. And so you can do your sums. Um, so that's me really. I used to be a teacher, so almost immediately as soon as I had my very early awakenings in my practice, I started to realize there was a need for me to teach what I was learning. And they often say the best way to learn something is to teach it. So that really solidified what I was learning from my clients at the time. Um, I've also grown a lot of food over the years, done a lot of mentoring, and set up a small sort of enterprise, teaching communities how to grow food. So that's me broadly. So I don't want to spend too much more time on me. Um, but so nearly 2 years ago, I nearly hung up my therapy coat, not that I wear one, and decided not to do this anymore. I had been working in practice 25 years. I'd been mentoring and teaching my colleagues. I'd been traveling internationally. I'd been designing workshops. I'd been teaching all about chronic fatigue. I'd been working with doctors. There were lots of things that I had been doing, and I think, in those previous number of years since 2020, I just lost my mojo really. And I started teaching people how to grow food more and so on and so forth. But what happened was about 2 years ago, just under, I went on to a woman's channel who specializes in chronic fatigue syndrome, and she was Raelan. And she interviewed me, and I thought, right, well, before I absolutely hang up my clogs and decide to, just see the occasional client here and there, maybe two, three a week, I'll dump everything I know about chronic fatigue onto her channel. So that's exactly what I did. And probably at some point during or after this call, I'll put the links there so you can watch the two interviews that I did. And it went live the day I flew to France for a holiday, it went live. And while I was there, I don't use my phone very much. I don't have email. Suddenly, I had 25 people booked in. I had my diary wide open. They all wanted to see me that week. I thought, oh my God, this is this is a spiritual crisis. This is a spiritual crisis. I'm not even at my laptop. I'm not even in my at my station. I can't do this. So anyway, long story short, I came back, sorted it all out, and I have seen 300 clients plus since over the last nearly 2 years. When I first went into training and talking about chronic fatigue, I based my whole philosophy on about 12 to 15 clients, um, because the patterns were so precise and so exact. Even if the solutions that I was offering at the time didn't work with some of the clients that I was working with because the times were different. We have to acknowledge the times were very different then to the way they are now. People were really stuck in a physical modality. They were really stuck complaining with their doctors why they couldn't get well. And I think the chronic fatigue community that is still traveling towards the perspective that I'm going to talk about with you today are still there. They're still stuck in the physical. But all the while we do that, we are kind of giving up what's happening on the spiritual and emotional level. And obviously, we are one organism. We are a whole being. We are mind, body, and spirit. We're all things. And I think to leave one of those equations, parts of the equation out, is to have a very blunt tool that doesn't work very well. So, but the amazing thing is, 300 clients later, I haven't swerved a moment in understanding what chronic fatigue is about. I am noticing the amount of material that there is online now and how many hundreds of people, thousands of people are seeking meaningful therapy, therapy that isn't just about techniques. It's not just about, tapping or doing whatever it is they need to do. It's about relationships. And in this modern age that we're all subject to this, AI and all of the online stuff, the human touch is absolutely essential. So the time is right now to be more heart-centered, to be more heartfelt, and to know how to stay still as us, as therapists. How do we keep our integrity, our center, while all of that is going on, with connecting at relational depth? So intro done. If you do have any questions or insights, just drop them in the chat and I'm more than happy to field them. I've got about 12 segments to work through, so I'll try and stop after each segment and see what's going on. So what we're going to explore today is the psycho-spiritual insights. I've got a list of things here. The mind-body connection, how that works. What happens when trauma affects the body? I've got a good little video that Chloe's going to share on the history of ME chronic fatigue. I'm not going to show it all today, but I'm going to talk briefly about it. The kind of person that suffers with chronic fatigue, because there is a particular type of person, and what are the causes? So there are many. This is why it's so complex, and this is why I call it spiritual, because once you've excluded toxicity, deficiency, trauma, or whatever else is going on in the body, some kind of physical imbalance, once you've addressed all that and you've still got ME chronic fatigue, what is the next part in that? It's emotional and it's spiritual. I'm going to look at a couple of ideas that came from Candace Pert, who was she was a neurologist. I think she was a neurologist, working with the mind body. She didn't intend to start that way, but she realized that the mind and the body were absolutely inseparable. And Hans Selye, a very early proponent of how stress affects the body, tracked it really well. And another researcher called Naomi Eisenberger. I've got many more examples. I'm not going to talk about them all in this talk today, of people that have been on the front line of marrying up the spirit with the body. And it is massive at the moment. I want to talk about what I mean by spiritual, because I'm not woo-woo. Okay, there's one thing I'm not, is woo-woo. Spiritual is very grounded, and I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about, as a therapist, what does it take to work at relational depth? What does that mean for us? Who do we have to be if we're going to work at depth? And I want to show a little video. I don't know if now's the right time. I might have mentioned it later. I might show it in a minute. I say be like weebles. For those of you of a certain age, and I'm talking perhaps my age, um, or a bit younger possibly, you'll remember the little egg-shaped weebles that wobbled, but they didn't fall down. Because we're not talking about being absolutely spiritually focused and we're saying, oh, we can wobble, but we come back to center. And that's how we need to be as therapists. Um, and also, what are we listening for in our clients? You know, how do we listen? What part of the psyche or the heart are we listening to? And one thing I wrote an article about many years ago called "How many people are there in the therapy room?" Now, superficially, it looks like just you and your client, but actually, there's all of the people and all of the history and all of the associations behind your client who made them who they are today. And there's all of the people behind you that have made you who you are today. So that necessarily leads us to the point that we cannot help but project onto our clients certain ideas that we have carried with us all of our lives. Projection, as you may well know in the therapy world, can be negative, but it can also be hugely positive because if you project correctly, you relate at a very deep level. But if you make assumptions that you think you know what you're doing and you project a false assumption, then you're going to break that connection. So when we get deep into our own center and into our own hearts and our own spirituality, then we learn to project not just our experience, but the fact that we know we are okay, we know we are Buddhas, we know there is nothing wrong with us. We don't carry shame, we don't carry guilt, or if we do, we're very aware of it and we park it to one side when with our clients. And therefore, I'm going to look for the perfection in my client opposite me. I'm going to look for the Buddha in them because I can see it in me. This is where projection is such an inescapable law. You know, we can only see the world as we are. And I want to show, it takes me a little while just to get used to showing these slides. Let me just see if I can just go through them quickly. That's not the one. Excuse me just a minute. Here we go. Right. Share. Screen. Share. Here we go. So I call it the value of projection. We can only see the world how we are, not how it is. This is how we get so confused and so sort of like misdirected. Because we assume everyone sees the world in the same way that we do, and that is not the case. And we can other people that don't see the world the way that we do. But from a Buddha perspective, from a spiritual perspective, we are all one. Okay, it doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter what you believe. We are still working at relational depth because I'm talking to your humanity. I'm talking to your deeper self. I'm talking to the Buddha within, not the belief systems that you hold. And the last comment there, change the way you look at things and the things you look at will change. I don't know if any of you have been through some of these revelations when, you know, you might have been absolutely suffering one way or another about something, and then suddenly there's a massive epiphany, a sudden breakthrough, and suddenly you just see things so differently. And this is what we're looking for in our clients, is to learn to look at the world differently. So let me just check the chat for questions. Yes, okay, your son suffered chronic fatigue. Hopefully this will help. Where might we find the article you mentioned, please? Article. Which one was it? Sorry, remind me. I'm on autopilot at the moment.
How
Um,
many people are in the therapy room, I think was the article you wrote. Was it?
the article I wrote. I'm not sure where it is, but if I can find it, I'll send it over. Let me just make a note. My article. Okay. Yeah, I'll find it somewhere. I redesigned my website a couple of years ago, or a year ago even, and It's gone missing. I work a lot with moral injury as part of CPTSD and the relational difficulties experiences, looking at all areas for emotional processing. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay, lovely. Um, so section 3, here we go. History. What is the problem with the way we view the world today, broadly? Let's just say the problem started, broadly speaking, with Descartes in the 17th century. Descartes in the 17th century. I think he died in 1650, so it's somewhere around before then. And Descartes said, the mind and the body are separate. We can't measure the mind with an instrument, so it doesn't really exist. So all we're going to do is look at the physical realities. Um, the problem with that, of course, is that it cuts off any kind of connectedness and inquiry into other areas of disease and illness. And it reminds me of some ancient old novels, I don't know, Jane Eyre or whatever, I can't remember which now, but where, the lady of the manor took to her bed for the rest of her life or whatever. And yeah, because she was ill, she was unhappy. She was unhappy in herself. She had a disease, but it wasn't a physical one. It was more of a spiritual one. Um, and before I continue, I just want to uh, share my screen once more. No, hold on, share screen. Here we go. So this is D.H. Lawrence, my absolute number one author of ever. And I'll read this quote to you now. D.H. Lawrence says, I am, excuse me a moment, sorry. I am not a mechanism, an assembly of various sections, and it is not because the mechanism is working wrongly that I am ill. I am ill because of wounds to the soul, to the deep emotional self, and the wounds to the soul take a long, long time. Only time can help, and patience, and a certain difficult repentance, long, difficult repentance, realization of life's mistake and the freeing oneself from the endless repetition of the mistake, which mankind has largely chosen to sanctify. So D.H. Lawrence, uh, says it in a nutshell, really, that the mind and the body are one. And that, if I'm spiritually unwell, if I am traumatized or troubled in my soul, then my body will follow suit. The problem is, in the 16th, 17th century, when Descartes was around, the spirit was getting in the way of science. They couldn't isolate the different things, and the spiritual thing was a nuisance, so they got rid of it. And thereby they got rid of the heart of humanistic inquiry. Rupert Sheldrake mentions this at great length in his book, The Science Delusion. And he talks about what at that time was also a competing body of thought, which was vitalism. And vitalism was looking at living entities, living entities. Materialism is looking at dead entities, entities that you can experiment on without spirit. And vitalism used to include the spiritual, the emotional, the psychological. So materialism has really set up a false divide between the mind and the body, because how can we separate them? We are an entity in it in our entirety. Um, and because it's separated the mind from the body, and it's got all of these different disciplines like psychology, psychiatry, coronary, I can't remember what it's called now, but whatever, all of the neurology, they've got all of these different strands of medicine. It's meant that the human condition has been fragmented into dozens of different specialities when in fact we are one. And this is a false divide. It's a consequence of reductivism, which is where we reduce everything down to the smallest particle. We tinker with that and we hope that feeds back to the top layers. But anyone who's experienced chronic fatigue or knows anyone with chronic fatigue, tinkering with the material often adds insult to injury. It's not, whatever drugs you might be given by doctors, whichever supplements, although I'm going to talk about the huge range of different causes, but, various physical interventions can cause a lot of harm. And you're fortunate if it doesn't, because it's such a complex condition, we have to look at the entirety of it, not just tinker, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, so to speak. So this materialism pervades modern life, and it's kind of divorced us from our very knowing, our very hearts, and our very wisdom, the wisdom within. And it's caused us to doubt ourselves and to trust um, doctors and the medical model. It's taught us to trust that when in fact we have to really evaluate, is this right for me? And what elements of it do I want to use? And is that useful for me at all? So I want to show one other. Here we go. I want to show one other share. Here we go. Okay. Oops. Here we go. It's down here. So as I did mention, I've practiced Buddhism for 43 years now. And it's been a long old journey. I mean, you don't just practice one Buddhism one day and you think, oh, I've arrived. It's kind of like an ongoing lifetime commitment, really. Um, and each time I practice, I'm just looking at my heart. I'm just trying to locate me within all of the troubles and all of the issues that are going on in my life, just find my center somewhere, to find my Buddhahood. This is what we call it in our strand of Buddhism. So Buddhism says, if you wish to free yourself from the sufferings of birth and death you have endured since time without beginning, and to attain without fail unsurpassed enlightenment, you must perceive the mystic truth that is originally inherent in all living beings. And what he's talking about there is the truth, or the mystic truth that is inherent in all living beings, is that each of us is endowed with the qualities of a Buddha. We are all Buddhas. We are all inherently wise, knowledgeable, compassionate, wisdom, compassion. What's the other one? There's three qualities of the Buddha. Wisdom, compassion. I can't remember the other one anyway. There's three of them. We're all inherently like that. The problem is that who we are has been clouded by illusion. And the illusion is that other people know better than me. Well, what if they don't? What if they don't know better than you? What if you are missing out on deeper layers of your own awareness and self-knowledge? Okay. There's another slide I want to share here. I hope you can see that. This is called the spiritual causes of disease, and this is another reason why stripping out the material from the spiritual causes illness. So the Buddha says that there are three types of people whose illness is extremely difficult to cure. The first is those who slander the great vehicle. So the great vehicle is just the body of Buddhist teachings, broadly speaking. The second is people who commit the five cardinal sins, and they are killing your mother, killing your father, killing a arhat or a wise person, killing a Buddha, and so on. So it's actually committing murder of some sort. And the third is ichantikas, and they are persons or people of incorrigible disbelief. These three categories of illness are the gravest in the world. Now, I believe, and this is my perspective, that people that have not found their own way of revealing their true nature, their true humanity, and their true Buddhahood, and connecting with themselves are persons of incorrigible disbelief. What that means is I'm going to trust somebody else before me. I'm going to explore with somebody else before me. Yeah, because I don't believe I have the answers. I am incorrigibly disbelieving. I don't trust me. My job is to teach people to learn to trust themselves. You have to come home to you. Only you have the answer for you, which is why I like to say you take this issue, you explore it, and then you make up your mind about how to go about it. Now, I'm not putting everything back in the hands of the person coming to me. My job is to show them the route, the journey to the bit that makes the difference, the heart of who they really are. So there's two questions in the chat. Here, let's have a look. Yeah. Okay. Marvelous. Thank you. Okay. So, what causes chronic fatigue syndrome? As I've said before, toxicity, deficiency, trauma, and spirituality. Um, so a lot of people do a detox or they try and get rid of a bad diet. It can help. It can really help. In fact, if you've had chronic fatigue for a brief amount of time and you realize that you're really toxic and you get rid of it, as long as you've not got into a mind trap, you'll come out of that quite quickly. Again, with deficiency, if you've been living on beans on toast for the rest of your life and you're anemic, then of course, um, I mean, these are simplistic, forgive me, but these are simplistic ways of looking at it. But if you've had a deficiency forever and then suddenly you're very anemic, as long as you're not getting into a mind trap, then treating that deficiency will help. However, often we're looking at trauma or spiritual malaise that goes much deeper. This starts with emotions. It often starts in childhood, doesn't have to, but it's usually childhood. And we're looking at an adaptive child who has to keep hypervigilant and watchful to stay safe in the family of origin. And once that child has adapted to those conditions, then they start to sacrifice themselves for the good of the family. Because the only way they will get protection is if they comply with these unspoken edicts, or traumatic experiences that you will only get cared for if you sacrifice all of your personality. What this tends to produce in adults is people who put too many others before themselves, who set themselves impossible goals and go out to achieve them. They are externally referenced. They get what their self-worth is about from looking at other people and seeing how they treat them. I often say that they've lost their center and they're on the outside of the potter's wheel. Now, if you've ever had a game, because I've only ever gamed with it, but if you've ever had a go at doing a potter's wheel, throwing a pot on a wheel, you'll know if it's not central, it's going to go all over the place. And the lesson in that is stay as centered as possible because then you are in charge of your life. Unfortunately, with a lot of people with chronic fatigue, they're not centered, they're on the outside, they're going round and round the wheel, and it is exhausting because there are things beyond their control and they need to have, I'm not saying they're control freaks at all, but they need to have a certain amount of predictability in an unpredictable world. And the problem with the early childhood programming is that there's never predictability. So they get very stressed and the nervous system gets very stressed. And as a result of that stress, physical tests will show up as a cortisol deficiency or a cortisol, what do they call it? Adrenal fatigue, which is basically where they've just run out of stress hormones because they're so stressed. Um, the other environmental toxicity that we're all living with right now, I'm sitting in front of it, right in front of me, is screens, EMFs, cell towers, pollution, sky, wind, rain, food, everything, is subject to huge pollution and it's putting a huge burden on the human population. Um, Interestingly, I have treated out of those 300, probably 100 people at least who have had long COVID or vaccine harms as well. So we're looking at a kind of pathology. I don't like the word very much, but that is about a complete depletion of energy. And this can be due to toxicity, as I've said before, and it can also be due to a too much load on the body, too many demands on the body. So I want to look up two things. I've got two slides here. Let me see if I can find them. Um, oh, come back. Here we go. Right. Uh, I think this is Candace Pert. Yes, here we go. So Candace Pert, she's amazing. I really, really admire. she's dead, unfortunately, but I really admire, admire her work. She's done some amazing work. Um, but she says the role of emotions, since emotions run every system in the body, don't underestimate their power to treat and heal. Emotions are the glue that hold your body and mind together. Your body is your subconscious mind. Now, anyone working in hypnotherapy will know about placebo and nocebo. And in fact, that is exactly what we are taught in hypnotherapy realms, is that you are bypassing the critical mind and you are reaching into the emotions and you are reprogramming and you are putting placebos or positive affirmations into the unconscious so that your client recovers and finds their center. Yes, it can work. It is amazing. It can work. And it also can fail, but it can work. And but this is exactly what Candace Pert is saying, is that, you know, this is going back decades. I don't know when she made this statement, but she died in 2013. That, you know, emotions are the glue that hold your mind and body together. Um, Another slide I want to show you right down the bottom here is Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome. And he identified this in, I think it was 1923 or in the 20s, 1920s sometime. And he said that when you're at baseline, you know, things are calm, and you get a stimulus that causes you to panic or you get into an alarm stage, then the 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 system responds with an alarm. So fight, flight, it responds with an alarm function. By design, it has to. If you've got an emergency going on, you know, you run away from that saber-toothed tiger. You have to. Um, it moves then into the resistance stage, which is where the body tries to bring you back to normal. However, if the body can't bring you back to normal because the alarm stage is so consistent and persistent and has endured for months, years, decades, then your resistance phase is not going to work anymore and you're going to move into stage 3 in exhaustion. Okay. Now, this is a physiological description of what happens when a system is in heightened alert, hypervigilance, heightened alert stage over a long period of time. That there will be one small stimulus, maybe a disease, a trauma in the family or something. And I say small, it can be small, it can be large, but there'll be one final straw that breaks the camel's back and the body will go into exhaustion phase. And the problem with chronic fatigue syndrome is people are so used to that high level of what he calls their homeostasis. They're so used to that as a baseline, they don't believe they've been stressed as much as that because it is unconscious. They are so used to their stress that they cannot believe that it is just stress, just that is causing the collapse of their body. So, um, So what you'll often find is that healing often, I do want to talk about a couple of clients actually, because I think this might help you. I don't know if to do it here or I'll do it later actually. I'll do it later. Um, so what you'll often find is that most people, when they get ill with chronic fatigue, are first of all looking for physical cures. We've all been programmed. You've got something wrong with you, go to a doctor, get a material fix, get a drug, get a tablet, do something. Yeah. And we'll look for toxicity, deficient light, dark sleep, and all sorts of things to help ourselves ground, you know, get some, it's all physiological. Um, However, that's not really where the problem lies. It can do, as I've said, as long as you've not got into a mind trap with it, you can get well at that level. But the minute the mind starts to take over and it's gone into trauma mode, then the physical won't work or it won't cure you. I want you to, there's a link, or I think Chloe's put a link in the chat somewhere to a video by George Monbiot, who's not my favorite guy, but he does actually describe in about half an hour the history of ME chronic fatigue. So if you go into that video and watch it outside, thanks, Chloe, you'll be able to see that video, and it is quite a checkered history. And I entered that whole world of chronic fatigue about 10 years in, or maybe 15 years into that whole debacle that went on. And it was very, very sensitive at the time. People did not want to know that this was emotional and spiritual. They were hell-bent on finding physical solutions for it. And it is important that you understand the history of chronic fatigue, because it informs you into how badly treated people with chronic fatigue have been over the years. So, desperation leads to the search for a much deeper psychological cause. And this is where I want to talk a little bit in a minute about what I will be offering later in May, which I'm calling a training retreat. So it's a 4-day immersive practitioner experiential retreat on really looking deeply at our psychology and the spirituality of ourselves, but in so doing, but always working with the client in mind as well. So we're looking at that very rich interplay between ourselves and our clients in the therapy room. And I'll talk about that later. So in desperation, people start searching for deeper causes. And this is what inundated me with work 2 years ago. I just dumped my stuff online and just thought, oh, well, if I get 1 or 2 clients out of that, I'll be happy. But when I got, over the last 2 years, and they're still producing more clients every week, 300. Yeah, thanks for that link, Chloe. That's brilliant. It's been, you realize just how hungry people are for their own spiritual peace and autonomy, and to stop looking outside for solutions. So these are the people that are the most ready to step in and heal. Some people do still turn up, which is really bizarre. They listen to the video and they think, I'll put all my trust and faith in Jenny. And then they turn up, and when I sort of hand back some responsibility, I can't do, I wasn't looking for that. Which is curious, because the video is so explicit about how I work. People are still looking outside of themselves, which is very symptomatic of chronic fatigue. Um, so, so how do we treat these people? What is it? I'm looking for omissions. I'm looking for generational trauma. I'm looking for them as family symptom carriers. There's a lot of people that carry the symptoms of the family, all the disowned stuff that the parents can't cope with or don't want to admit. Instead of admitting that they are at fault, they blame the children, and the children carry it because they've had to carry it their lifetimes long just to get the love and affection that they think they should have from their parents. And we're looking at scapegoating. A lot of people with chronic fatigue are scapegoated. That's exactly how it happened. There's a lot of rejection, isolation, fear, super pleasers. Many people with chronic fatigue negate their own inner comfort for that of others. They'll say yes to everything. There's hyper self-critical, hyper vigilant, and are very much trapped in that sort of general adaptation syndrome of Hanselia, where they cannot break out. The nervous system is so stressed, and they're so dependent on approval by the very people that are scapegoating them. It's very tragic, really. And now I've got a note here to tell you about one of my clients. Here we go. So one of the things I want to teach in this retreat is, how do you technique on the hoof? So what I mean by that is, you might have a broad idea, you might have a broad mind map of what you're looking for in that particular client. But how you get there is just an exercise in mystical magic. Some of you may work like this already, so forgive me if I'm telling you stuff you already know. But this one particular lady, I've got two ladies actually, similar similar age, European. They're both from mainland Europe. I won't mention details because I don't want to reveal their identity, obviously, not that you will know them, but this one lady I saw yesterday, she's a bit of a journeyer. So she's done her ayahuasca, she's done her iboga, and she's done all of the rapé and all of the other stuff that you do. And she had recovered mainly from chronic fatigue as a result of that. But then trauma in the last year or 18 months has given her a relapse. And so she's back in that space. And yesterday I saw her for the fourth time and she said she felt so much better. And I said, "What's different?" She said, "I feel safe." I said, "That's great." So um, she said, "But there's still some anxiety there." I said, "Great. Okay, let's go and have a look at that anxiety then. Let's see what we can find." So we found this little weedy black figure. I mean, I had no idea what she was going to turn up with. It could have been anything. So, but I asked her to give it a shape, a color, form, a character, and it was a little weedy black figure with a sword. And she was defending, and trying to swipe things around and make sure that the client was safe and so on. But actually, she was causing more harm than good. Um, and the client was slowly becoming overwhelmed by her because she was so familiar with this black anxious figure. And I thought, okay, this is not a mental process, but I know she's being led away from her safety. And I know she's experienced safety several times, many times in her history. She knows where safety is in her body. So while this little black figure with a sword is jumping up and down like mad, I'm thinking, I know um, she has the capacity to find her own safety. I know she has. But her own ego state, as the person that she is incapable of holding still with this black figure. So I asked her to locate the safety within her and what it looked like. And she said, "It looks like the ocean. It's vast and it holds me. I float, I live, I can breathe. It's a wonderful sensation." So I got her to explore that even more. Tell me more about it. Tell me more. Become the ocean. What would you say to my client? What would you say to her? "Oh, I would say this, blah, blah. Relax, be kind, blah, blah, blah." And then I turned back to the black figure somewhere through this intervention and said, "What's happening now?" And the black figure had put her sword down and she was listening. And then I got the client whose ego state had been really, really bolstered up by this experience with the vast ocean to talk again to the little black figure. And she apologized. "I'm sorry I didn't see you before. I'm sorry I didn't realize you were just looking after me. I thought you were out to get me." And the little black figure said, "I didn't realize that you couldn't see me," and so on and so forth. So what you've got a parts intervention, really. You've got an intervention whereby you're giving a voice to different parts. And I have no idea what's going to show up. Almost all of my therapy is like this. I have a broad outline, but I have no idea what's going to transpire. And my job is to stay absolutely present. If I start panicking and worrying, "Oh, what do I do now? What do I do now?" I've lost the plot. So I'm just with her. And I think they know that you're with them because I'm in the experience with her. I can see the black figure, I can see the ocean, I can sense how she's feeling. And this is what it means to work transpersonally. It's kind of getting in there with them, but holding your center so that you're not pulled off balance by your client. So I just wanted to share that. I've got another one I might share later. And I've got to say, these kinds of clients, out of the 300 that I've seen, I've probably seen 60 or 70 that are like this. They're on their journey in a big way and they know where to look. I'd say another 100, 150 have been clients that are ready to explore. They haven't gone that far yet. Um, and they've been ready to do their work. And I'd say another 50 stop. I can't get them past base. I can't get them. I can see them, but I know they can't see themselves. Um, and I'll do everything I can without stressing because I know what my capacity is. I can't force this on people. They have to come in the way that they're ready to come. They do experience benefit, but they may not experience recovery. So let's have a look at how long have we got? Okay, I'm going to stop at 1:15, if not a few minutes before, and then we can have a question and answer. Let me just see if there's anything in the chat. Three, is that my son recovered with diets and no medication. He was bedbound and could not cope with heat. Yes. Good. Excellent. Very good. Yeah. It is possible. It's absolutely possible. And this is why, when you go onto Raelan's channel, um, there's all kinds of stories about how people recover. And it is really the only people you want really are the ones that you can help. You don't want people coming to you with an expectation that you can't possibly help. Is your methodology of these parts intervention via hypnosis? Yes. This is always eyes closed, hypnosis, go within. So and the hypnosis, I don't use inductions in any big way. I will often say to a client, shall we explore this? Yeah. Let's explore this anxiety that you're feeling. Okay, just close your eyes. Just breathe, take a couple of breaths. Just know this time is yours and tell me what this anxious feeling looks like. Yeah. Might take another 30 seconds, a minute, but broadly speaking, it's a very, very because the client's already there, they're waiting to do the work. They don't need more explanations or more words from you. They're waiting to do the work. Um, I've been very privileged and honored to even work with Buddhist priests, monks, sorry, Buddhist monks, who are committed. They're in their monastery, working day and night with their own consciousness, and yet something still eludes them. Um, So in that case, I am using hypnotherapy as a vehicle. I'm using it as a vehicle to get them to look at places that have been hidden, hiding out. They've transcended their pain and their misery by going into this level of high consciousness. But that doesn't mean the experiences aren't still somewhere lodged in their unconscious. So that's how it's worked with those amazing people. My client uses so much poetic and intellectual language, having been a pharmacist student, I'm finding it impossible to get near the CFS or any feelings at all. Is he not in the right place yet to work? Potentially not. No. Yes. And one of the things I teach on the course as well is how to reflect this clearly to your client because it takes a certain amount of counselling skill to do that. Um, and to even be self-disclosing on some level or use immediacy. These are counselling skills that I will be teaching on the course. This kind of idea that, okay, I notice you're using language and we're not getting to the deeper cause. What's stopping you getting there? This is a psychotherapeutic tool. What's standing in the way? So it's very hard to get into that if you've got this smokescreen of words. I've had a good few clients like that in the last 2 years. You've got a smokescreen of words, and it's very hard to get beyond that. But there are ways of making them realize that you can't fix it at that level. You have to go deeper. Because if words was all it took to fix it, then they'd be fixed. Um, some people desperately need to be heard and seen and witnessed. And that's why they're so garrulous. That's why they're so talkative, because it's like, oh, I've got someone who's listening at last. But that's not going to cure them either. If they've come to a hypnotherapist, then, you need to go deep. You need to go a lot deeper than that. So, so how psychology and spirituality works. I don't know yeah, okay. So let's look at Naomi Eisenberger, who was a researcher. I can't remember which university now, somewhere in America. I think it was East Coast. Anyway, she did a social exclusion experiment, and I think it was an online thing where she set the parameters of the game that everyone was playing on this online experiment to single out one person so that they could not take part or were not admitted to the game. And uh, so basically she socially excluded them without their knowledge. And this person was then, everyone was measured afterwards for their stress hormones. And this particular person with the exclusion, they looked at where the pain was. What kind of pain did that person experience? And the area of the brain that lit up was the pain center, where you experience physical pain. So the conclusion is that we are we are social beings and we are not meant to be alone. And we are meant to work in groups and in communities. And if we are excluded, it is a danger to our ability to live. Now, if you look at probably all of you, you're on your own at home. I'm on my own at home. I'm on my own all day working online with people. It's very isolating the way we work. This is our modern society. And so we experience a level of exclusion most days. Um, However, if, you know, if you were singled out as a child, then this is going to be very significant for you. Um, you could have been singled out for special treatment by one of your parents. I've actually also worked with people with SRA, satanic ritual abuse, in the last year, and all kinds of horrendous abuse that children have been put through. Um, Often you've got very narcissistic mothers, um, and sometimes there's autism in the extended family. And this aren't, I'm not blaming these people. I'm just saying this is the kind of family system that operates within families where one of the symptom carrier, the person with ME chronic fatigue, has sacrificed themselves to belong to this system. And if anyone knows anything about no worries, thanks, Jeffrey. If anyone knows anything about family constellation therapy, you will know that each person within the family has a role to play, and often children will sacrifice themselves to be part of that system. I've met it quite a few times in my client group, where usually mum presents their child with chronic fatigue, and I have to navigate how the relationship is creating the anxiety loop, which is creating the chronic fatigue in the child. And often, if a mother can identify that her over concern and over worry about the child is not conducive to the child's recovery, if I can get the mother to see that and to relax more, often the child will come back into balance. Now, this isn't necessarily a family that's deeply traumatized. If children are coming in to therapy, it's usually because families are very concerned and they want them to get better. So I'm not suggesting, everyone who presents with a child with ME chronic fatigue is somehow an abuser. I don't mean that. This is the unconscious cycle that runs between children and their parents, mothers usually, unfortunately. So often with this generational trauma and that comes through the generations, and especially in Europe, I'm seeing an awful lot of this in the clients that I'm treating in Europe, going back to the two great world wars and all of the displacement of peoples, the Polish coming out of Poland and the Germans splitting down the middle and all of the trauma. Often there's generational trauma going back three or four, well, at least two generations going back. And what happens is the people of today, the clients that I'm seeing, do not know where this trauma comes from. They think it's them, but actually it can go back generations. And this is where working, and I'm going to talk about another client here now. So working within a generational perspective can really lighten their load. I'll give you an example. This was an experiment you may know about monkeys. They what do they call a group of monkeys? I can't remember what they call them now. But anyway, a family of monkeys. They hung some bananas on a hook in the center of the room. And every time the monkeys jumped up to try and get one of the bananas, they got squirted with cold water, or they got something happened to them. I can't remember what it was. It was probably squirted with cold water. And after a while, they got conditioned, Pavlovian conditioning, if I do that, that happens, I won't do that. So after a while, they realized there was no point going after the bananas in the middle of the room because they just got the most uncomfortable, horrible experience. Then they taught their children how to do that. So the children used to grab for the bananas, and the mothers would pull them back and say, "Don't go there, that's dangerous." And then 2, 3 generations on, or from there, the monkeys were still ignoring the bananas in the center of the room, even though they were a very essential, food, because the trauma had been passed down epigenetically. So that means that clients often don't know where their trauma is coming from. It's coming from other generational incarnations from the history. But what is common is that trauma is stored. It's stored in the epigenome of the system. Family constellation, I've taken part in quite a few of them. This is a guy called not Hans, Bert Hellinger, who went down to Africa somewhere, and I think he intended to convert them to Christianity, but in fact their systems of spirituality were much stronger than the Christian, and he learned a lot from them instead, and he brought back this constellation idea because it kind of puts everyone back in the role that they're meant to be in, rather than dabbling and, like overbearing, overweight, over interfering with other members of the family. So, anyway, that's a whole other story. I will touch upon that in the retreat training as well. So trauma gets stored, contracts get made in infancy, the trauma gets compacted over generations, and we are left with this organism that is so stressed, has so much trauma in the body, we have to get to it somehow. Now, this is where I want to, let me just check the chat. Yeah, that's fine. This is where I want to mention this other lady that I'm working with at the moment, who has also, she's actually a medical doctor, but reasonably disillusioned with her practice and has done quite a lot of shamanic traveling. And she asked me a couple of weeks ago if I could get to the original wound that was causing her to be so spiritually dislocated with herself. And I said, okay. Now, the original wound may not be in this lifetime. It may be in previous lifetimes. Is that okay with you? And she said, yeah, that's fine. So, so we went into a place. I can't remember all the details now. I've just read through her notes before the call just to make sure I could remember it all. But I've made a few pocket notes here. So we went into a place where things were beautiful and paradisical and everything was amazing, and she was in her strength, and I wanted to get her, so this is therapying on the hoof. I wanted to get her into a resourceful state first. I wanted her to know that she was safe to return to this amazing place. And because she's done a lot of traveling shamanically, she was more than happy to go to this beautiful place in her soul. And then I asked her if she could find an article in that place that was meaningful that she could hold in her hand. And she found a small stone and a feather. And I said, these things locate you where you are. You can always come back here. Now, I said, now I want you to look back from this beautiful place that you're in. I want you to look back generationally, as far back as you can, and look far, far back and tell me, what do you see? I didn't know what she would see. I had no idea. But what she saw was, on her father's side, she saw a war history going back, and it had happened, but she hadn't realized that it impacted on her. And she saw this history going back. And she saw that her father's hostility towards her, which had been tremendous, had just been inherited from his father and his father. And it was this very staunch belief system that was very Victorian. I mean, I won't mention the country she's from. She's European, but it was an old Victorian kind of attitude, um, be strict, don't spare the rod, spoil the child, that sort of thing. And that had just been passed down. And I asked her if she was able to return some of this trauma to her father. And she said, yes, I think I can give it back to him. He's looking very confounded, whereas she was very scared of him. She said, he doesn't get it. And I said, well, he probably won't. This is just second nature for him. And she said, yeah, but I'm giving it back to him. I said, great, excellent. And we went through a few more ideas. We looked at the stone and the feather, and she came back to whatever it was. And when she came out of that intervention, she said, I can see it's not my fault. I can see I haven't caused this. And I've just internalized and carried the family trauma down the generations. Um, and it was a moment of clarity for her where she realized that she was actually already perfect. There was nothing wrong with her. So that was very rewarding for me, but incredibly rewarding for her, obviously. But the thing I want to emphasize is I don't know where these things are going to go. I'm not techniquing with a design in mind. I'm just able to sit present, take the journey with them, and see where it leads. So, briefly, um, if I can make it brief. Yeah, I've done quite a lot already. So, spirituality, what is it? What do I mean? Am I talking woo-woo? Am I talking some kind of religious body of thought? What am I talking by spiritual? And you may realize by now that I'm not really coming from a great body of religious doctrine, um, because the transpersonal approach transcends religion. It's really about experiencing the humanity and the soul of somebody in front of you. And that's what I mean by spirituality. What's happened in our modern world is that we don't belong anymore. We don't belong in this world. We're online all day. Um, we don't belong outside anymore. Everything's, insulated. We've got centrally heated homes. We barely step outside the door. We're not connected with nature anymore. We don't know who we are. We don't have a huge community like we used to have. They used to say it takes a village to raise a child. Now it just takes you. What a responsibility. Um, and people that do go that whole woo-woo spiritual route, and you know, they're bypassing the realities of the body. And that's because they're traumatized. So if you've met people that are sort of love and light, but are very unhealthy, it's not because they're not wonderful people, it's because they can't acknowledge the trauma. The trauma is too painful, and it seems so much easier to get into this love and light thing. And genuinely, they may feel that. But I would say you're leaving a part of you behind if you don't acknowledge and work on and resolve the trauma. And, maybe some of you have heard about soul retrieval, where parts of the soul break off in trauma and, they go off and travel away. And, you become an incomplete soul. Parts of you have broken off. And that's where trauma has removed us from our spiritual nature. And I believe we are spiritual beings, not doings. Um, and what I'm looking to help my clients with is to develop grace and forgiveness for themselves and acceptance for themselves. And to stop the soul wandering and to bring it home with love and compassion, so that they belong to them first before they belong to anything else. And this is exactly what happens with trauma-based mind control. If anyone's ever watched the Bourne Identity, where Matt Damon, I think it is committing all kinds of things, but he's not aware he's doing it. And that's because, unfortunately, in the echelons in the CIA, they are traumatizing people and then programming the multiple personalities that come off of that trauma-based mind control so that those alternative personalities never know what they've done because once they come back into their normal self, it's all forgotten. And there's another film called The Manchurian Candidate, I think, which you'll all probably know as well. So trauma, let me give you a personal experience of this. When my daughter was young, I was I was married to a man with, I believe, quite severe Asperger's autistic spectrum disorder. And I felt very traumatized by that. And the reason was because my father was very similar. And it was like a repeat of the trauma that I'd been through. And I was in so much pain because of him. At least this is what I thought. I left him when she was 1. I took her with me. And by the time she was 6, we were still in and out of courts with horrendous continuing trauma. But at the time, I was doing my training. And one day I realized that how I was feeling was affecting my daughter. And she was last in her class. And it was really quite uncomfortable. And I didn't know at the time that my trauma was affecting her. And then I had this massive realization that my ex-husband wasn't doing this to me. He was just doing it because that's how he is. It was me that was making it personal. And once I realized it wasn't my fault and he wasn't doing it to me, then I could surrender and let go and see him actually with a very compassionate lens that I hadn't seen before because he didn't know what he was doing. Now, the moral of that story is, I was deeply engrossed in the law of cause and effect. I didn't realize that my daughter's bottom of the class and distraction had to do with my trauma. But once I realized it and I let it go, she rose to second or third in the class and started to focus. So I knew then categorically that my emotional, spiritual state directly influenced my daughter's development. And we have this concept in Buddhism called Aishofuni, which is the law of cause and effect as the oneness of self and environment. So the minute you change, your environment will spring to shape. Right, I'm aware I said I'd stop in 6 minutes. So I'm going to try and go through this quite quickly, if I may. Um, so what about you? What about you as a therapist? How do you work? What is burnout? Um, I've already mentioned it. Burnout is when you're using your head. You're not in your center. Um, the body's not safe. You're in self-protection mode. That's burnout. Whereas if you're looking for the Buddha within, and you can see it in you, then you can forgive yourself. You don't need to work with your head. You work with your heart. And that's quite a challenge, but it's one that can be made, absolutely. So our magic power is precisely this. What we see in ourselves, we project onto others. Um, Let me just quickly have a look at this question. How much of this newly learned knowledge do you think it's okay to share with the client, do you think? Interesting. Depends on the client, obviously, because you've got to be aware of what their capacity is. And if they're not, you've got to listen for clues and words. And when and if you do use it, you use it sparingly, very small snippets of it, because otherwise, it's just theory. You're not relating to them. So you do need to relate to your clients deeply, and not just give them a lecture on what you've learned or what you know. And that's the skill of being a therapist. It's learning how to relate at the client's ability to relate and dropping in little suggestions or little identifications here and there. I will be exploring that hugely on the retreat in May. I want to teach you how even bad outcomes can have a positive impact because if a client isn't following a technique that you want them to, there'll be a reason for it. So if you can identify the reason, then you've got a positive outcome. And you can share that with them. And I'll show you how to share that in a humanistic way. Shamans look into the souls of people. Um, and that means that instead of just delivering techniques, you run alongside your client and you share and you explore together with them. It's an art, not a science. You cannot take your client to a place that you have no faith in. Yeah? If you don't believe something, you can't take your clients there. And I know that personally as well, because there's certain elements of hypnotherapy, therapy, modalities, certain client groups I don't go to because I can't feel it in my own body. So, I'll do my best, but it's not something I can say, yeah, oh yeah, I know how to fix this. Like, for example, addiction. I'm not very good at addiction. I can work with it, but it's not my speciality because addiction creates a lot of lying, intentional or unintentional. And I rely upon my clients telling me the truth about how they're feeling. And if they're going to lie to me, I, 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 what's the point? What's the point? I can't work with it. Yeah. And I can't even call them out on the fact they might be lying because I've not been an addict and I don't know why they would lie. That's not my speciality. Um, so I often turn clients like that away, for example. Um, okay, I want to share a poem and I just want to see this last question. Yes, you can have an initial trigger. Yes, so many people can identify initial trigger, usually a virus of some kind. How valid is this? Absolutely, absolutely valid. If you go back to the part of the talk, because this will be on replay, talking about Hanselia, that if your baseline is quite high, your level of stress is quite high, then a trigger can send you over into that cascade around the other side, and you don't know why. You don't know what the trigger has been. Um, or you might be so toxic that one more toxic thing and your triggers and it sent you over the edge. And then, of course, you've got to then detox, and that might be all you need to do. So, right, we've got a minute. Um, the mature heart knows what it can and can't do. Burnout is not using, it is the reason you suffer burnout is because you're not using your heart. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing. Oh, heart, oh, is that a bit dangerous? Do I overproject or what if I have to stay in my head? I have to stay aloof. The curious thing is that if you work with your heart and you know yourself well enough, you can still stay relatively dispassionate. You do not get involved in your client's stuff just because you're working with your heart. If you're unresolved in yourself and you've got an issue that resonates so closely with your clients, it's very difficult to stay in your heart center because you move into your head. That's your own survival mechanism. So I want to end with one poem. Oh, let me have a look. Let me just see if I can find it. I want to end with a poem that one of my clients wrote. Oh, and there's something else as well. One of my clients wrote a number of years ago. She actually wrote the nutrition part of my course because she was a nutritionist. I've revised it since then. There's more to know than what she shared with us. But this is what she said. Cherry's poem, it strips your body of energy, takes away your dignity, your heart, your soul, your reason to be. It makes me stop and see I have forgotten to be me. Nurture and nourish the person who is inside, allowing them to break free. There is no reason to hide. And that still moves me all these years later. She must have written that 23 years ago. That still moves me because I can see how kind and gentle that poem was when she was describing her own journey into her heart and her own recovery. So basically, just to conclude, we need to be the change we wish to see in the world, basically. Yeah? And the world could not be more hungry for it now. If we want to reach the hearts and souls of people and make a significant difference to the trajectory of where we're going in this world, we need to get into our heart chakra. We need to get into our heart center. And I think the link, oh, I think Chloe's already shared it, but the replay, I think Chloe's going to send a copy of the replay to you, but it's also going to be on my website. And you can find it on my website at Open Mind Therapy. Oh dear. Let me see. Where is it? There. Oh, yes, lovely. openmindtherapy.co.uk/upcoming events for professionals 2026. So that's where you'll find that. So, thank you very much for joining me. And I think now if we turn off the recording, Chloe, and then we can open to question and answer.